Brian, I mean, this is a huge update for the markets, very different than what we were talking about yesterday at this time.
Yeah, but we still have to acknowledge that these wild swings in the market are to be expected, right? Every day it seems like we're getting 5 to 6, as was the case yesterday.
Right.
Sometimes more than that percent.
Volatility.
Swings. Right, and that's the volatility. That's the name of the game. Net, we're still quite below where we were 3 months ago. And I think that it's not necessarily comforting for anyone to see, okay, we're up 1,000 points today. Exactly. Within the context of what we've seen the past 2 weeks, it's still not a great story.
Well, we do have the closing bell there on Wall Street on the NASDAQ and the NYSE. And as we mentioned, markets today seeing a little bit of a boost, as Brian was just saying, 1,000 points. There it is. And this is where markets closed for the day. Let's show those numbers. We did see green on the screen after the Fed took action. Okay, the Dow closed up 5%, just barely 1,000 points. The S&P closed up almost 6%. The NASDAQ up more than 6%. And Brian, just to return to that point, I was saying earlier on the show, too, I mean, it's hard to get too jazzed up about a little bit of green there, considering just how far we've fallen in a matter of days.
Yeah, and I think the Fed action is something that maybe contributed a little bit to this, but I think largely it's really the fiscal policy and just the fact that the administration has kind of, over the course of today, ratcheted up the amount of money that it's been asking for and entertaining the idea of a full-on dollar drop to average Americans is, I think, optimistic from a fiscal policy stance. What we do know is that from the Federal Reserve standpoint, they don't really have a lot left. They have plenty of tools left, but they use their levers pretty dramatically on Sunday. They announced that commercial paper funding facility today, which should hopefully provide some relief to businesses. And the big deal there is that it's not just the banks, right? It can offer commercial paper facilities to airlines, to cruise ships, to restaurants. So that's going to be helpful in the short term. But again, there's no bottom to this coronavirus. So that's the problem here from a termism standpoint.
Well, Brian, I know that there's still lots that they could do just industry specific in terms of today's move. But when we look ahead, you're saying that maybe the Fed is running out of options. They don't have a lot left that they could do. If they were to announce something else within the next couple of days, what would they likely announce at this point?
Well, something that a lot of people are watching for is what they call a term asset-backed securities lending facility. It's called TALF, and it's very similar to the commercial paper lending facility that was announced today, except it would be the Federal Reserve supplying liquidity to the asset-backed security world, which for those, if that sounds like foreign language and alien language, that's basically the Federal Reserve allowing a lot of these business debts to be packaged and then purchased by the Fed, which would hopefully provide more liquidity. Now, the problem is that post-crisis, there were some rules that were put in place that limited what the Fed could do in a facility like that. So it actually has a little bit of its hands tied from that perspective. But another few things that it could do, look, it could change quantitative easing. We have to remember that when it announced $700 billion of asset purchases on Sunday, that was not a ceiling. The Federal Reserve could decide it can change that. If it wants to boost that to $1 trillion, go ahead. So the Federal Reserve is basically leaving its playbook open. It has a few other things that it can do. But for right now, I think the Federal Reserve wants to say, hey, the administration, the White House, and Congress should do what it can try to do now to address and provide some stimulus to the economy.
Well, and that's exactly what we've been hearing from so many analysts on the street, so many portfolio managers, too. There's so much that the Fed can do just in terms of monetary policy. But what needs to happen now is some sort of fiscal response. And we got some details out of the administration this afternoon. But I think many people on the street still want to hear more. There's still more that they could do. There's more money that they could potentially just in terms of helping small businesses. We just had the mayor of San Jose on the show talking about the fact that small businesses have already seen a 50 to 60% drop in their business over the last couple of days, and it's expected to get significantly worse. So there's a lot of people, not only on Wall Street, but on Main Street, that are looking for a lot of answers.
And small restaurants especially. I mean, if you are a newish or small restaurant and you have a really, really bad 6 months, I mean, that can put you out of business.
Well, this is exactly it. So, I mean, this is a very personal story, but my uncle owns a number of restaurants in San Francisco, and he was telling me, I mean, he's already lucky to have more than one restaurant. He's done pretty well for himself. He said, I don't have enough cash for 3 weeks. Yeah. And that's the problem, is that the coronavirus, most people will tell you, is going to last way longer than that. So where do you find cash? And for small businesses, that's a challenge. But if you are a slightly larger company where you're issuing commercial paper, hopefully the Federal Reserve's announcement today is going to do something for you, because commercial paper is a way that companies can find short-term financing up to 270 days, oftentimes 90 days. So people try to take that out for 3 months. But that's not a lot of time within the context of the coronavirus as well. So if they cannot renew that commercial paper after 3 months, where are they going to go? So the Fed opened that facility to try to renew that paper if companies need it.
And speaking of small businesses, I mean, we're talking about the business owners, but that's not to mention the employees too, because companies that have closed stores are being pressured to pay the employees while they're not working.
Or lay them off.
If you own a small business, I mean, you can't pay that many people while they're not working.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.